a plate full of protein. At the table, Sydney here. We are teaching you today all about protein. So our next couple segments will be focused on macronutrients, and our macronutrients are 3 different nutrients that we need. They're important for our body. They all have important functions for our body, and it's something that is pretty much in all the foods we eat. So pretty much anything that you eat will fall into one or multiple of these macronutrient categories. So there are 3 different macronutrients: protein, which is what we're talking about today, carbohydrates, and then fats. And each of these play a vital role in our body, and they're very, very important for us to be consuming. So if you're ever looking at a diet and you're not sure if maybe it's a healthy diet for you to go on, you need to pay attention to if it's including all 3 of those macronutrients. There can be dangerous things that can happen if you're limiting or eliminating any of these macronutrients. So we want to make sure that we are consuming all 3 of them and getting enough of the nutrients that we need from them. So we'll talk about each one in our next couple shows. Today's focus is all about protein. And we hear a lot about, oh, you need to make sure you have protein, incorporate lots of protein in your diet. Protein is important because it is the macronutrient that is kind of like the building block for all of the things in our body. So it helps our organs to build tissue, it helps our hair to grow, our nails to grow. It is really something that, like I said, it's a building block. So it is something that helps our body to function at its best. So it's important for us to have protein for that reason. Now, there are different types of protein. So we have plant-based protein, and then we also have animal-based protein. Protein typically is going to come from things like our meats, dairy, so any of our animal-based foods. And then also there are certain plant-based foods that do also contain protein. Those plant-based proteins typically contain carbohydrates as well. It's just the way that they are made up naturally. So typically if you're having a plant-based protein, it will fall into both of those macronutrient categories. Our animal-based proteins will usually fall into the protein category and the fat category, and sometimes they'll have a little bit of carbohydrates as well. So a little bit about the different types of protein that we have. Protein is, you can eat the animal-based kind, you can eat the plant-based kind. They're both great sources for us. Plant-based is going to have a lot of those micronutrients, which are also essential for our diet, which are things like our different vitamins and minerals that we should be consuming. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on our recipes, and we'll talk a little bit more about protein in just a second. What we are making today is a lentil recipe from our Med Instead of Meds program. And then we also, it's got a cumin vinaigrette in it. It's really good. And then we're also making tuna steaks. We are making ahi tuna steaks, and I'll explain a little bit more about tuna. It's one of those things that are particular in how you cook it. I love tuna steaks. It's very different flavor profile than if you're getting like canned tuna. So we'll start with our lentils because, as I said, they take a little bit longer. And we're gonna start with our pot here on high, and we're gonna add in our lentils and our liquid. So lentils are a really great starter bean or legume. They're technically a legume, not a bean. They remind you of beans. But if you are new to consuming beans or legumes, this is a great one to start with because they're very easy. They're easier on the digestive system. They're also easier to cook. You can take them from dried, so they're very affordable. And they don't have to soak. So typically if you're doing something like your regular beans, dried beans, they will have to soak for about 24 hours. But if you are doing lentils, you can take them straight from the bag and throw them in your pot, and they only take about 15 minutes. So we're gonna throw a cup of those, and then I've got 2 cups of liquid. Now you can do water, all water, you can do vegetable broth, you can do a mixture of water and vegetable broth, which is what I did today. I did a cup of vegetable broth and a cup of water. So what we're gonna do next is just let that come to a boil, and then it will be ready for us to add some more of our ingredients. So part of why we want to incorporate our proteins, well, one of the things about our proteins is that there are different amino acids that make up our proteins. So for a complete protein, we have 9 essential amino acids, and an incomplete protein can be any number of any of those amino acids. So it might have only 3 of the 9, 4 of the 9, anything like that. You can make an incomplete protein a complete protein by pairing 2 different incomplete proteins together to have all 9 of the essential amino acids. So there are ways to kind of finagle a complete protein without consuming a total complete protein. A lot of our complete protein sources are going to be animal-based, except for quinoa, which does actually have all 9 essential amino acids. So we're gonna let this get to a boil. We'll take a quick break and we'll dive back into proteins and cooking our meal today.
Introducing the Star Communications app. All the tools you need in one convenient location. You can access Watch TV everywhere. Check local channel lineup. Check your Star email. View and pay your Star bill. Report troubles. Use your Star Security app. Check your home voicemail. Sign up for CrowdFiber. Check your Wi-Fi speed. The list keeps going and going. Download for free from the App Store or Google Play.
Hey guys, welcome back. So we have our lentils. They are already to a boil. They're looking really good. They're smelling good. And what we want to do now is reduce the heat so that it's not to a full boil, and just let it simmer for about 15 minutes. So you can kind of see it boiling over here, but we're gonna cut that back, and I'm gonna throw the lid on, and we'll just let it sit here and simmer for a while. Now it can depend on your, what your lentils variety is as to how long it can cook. So our recipe actually says 15 minutes to an hour as to how long the lentils have to cook. I have never had lentils that have needed a full hour. They do tend to cook pretty quick, and you don't want them to get mushy. They can also get mushy pretty quickly because they're a smaller legume. So you want to make sure you're just keeping an eye on them. We'll check them in about 15 minutes and see where they are, see if they need a little bit longer. In the meantime, I'm actually going to go ahead and chop up our shallots here. I pulled these out of the garden from our garden across the street where the master gardeners grow some stuff, and I think I'm only going to end up using one of those, but you just need a small shallot. I did end up cutting off the top stem part that we pulled, and then I, of course, rinsed it really well and cut off the bottom as well. So shallots, pretty easy to use. They're very small. We want this to be cut fairly small so that it will blend with our legumes very well. And this is part of our vinaigrette. So you can actually make this vinaigrette dressing. It's a cumin vinaigrette for other stuff too, but it tastes really good on top of these lentils. Now, beans are one of those things we tend to not get enough of those in our diet, and they are pretty high in protein. Again, those are not a complete protein. Like I said, most of our animal-based foods are where our complete protein comes in, but they are a incomplete protein. And so you might have heard of like beans and rice being paired together pretty frequently. Beans and rice together actually make a complete protein. So that is why sometimes we pair certain things because of what we get when we do that. Also, it just tastes really good together, right? But beans also have a lot of fiber, and they are pretty high in our carbohydrates, but they are what we call more of our complex carbs versus our simple carbs. So it takes a little bit longer for us to digest them, and they're what give us energy. We'll dive into that on our next segment, so I don't want to steal our thunder from our carb show, but carbs are absolutely essential for us to be eating and consuming, and they are definitely a good part of an important part of our diet from the benefits we get from those. So this looks pretty good. We are going to be adding this towards the end. So we are going to cook our dressing completely different from our lentils here. So we're just going to let our lentils finish cooking, and once they're ready, we'll begin our dressing. Dressing is very easy. It's just got olive oil, balsamic vinegar, some spices, our shallot, and then a little bit of lemon and cayenne pepper. So we'll be making all of that next. A little bit more about some of the sources that we can get our protein from. So the main places that we tend to see our protein is, like I said, with those beans and legumes, nuts and seeds for our plant-based proteins. And there are certain grains that also have protein in them as well. And then for our animal-based proteins, we see it in our fish, we see it in our chicken, beef, pork, any animal meat, and then our dairy products. So if you are comparing something like, if you're comparing milk, for example, a regular cow's milk versus something like oat milk, which has become pretty popular, if you compare the two, the protein is not going to be quite the same. The animal-based protein animal-based milk, dairy, tends to have a little bit more protein than those other plant-based proteins. And we also want to consider, when we're talking about milks, the other micronutrients which are important. So calcium is a big one that we tend to get from our dairy products. And we do get that from certain greens. So collards, kale, any of your dark leafy greens, as well as broccoli, tend to have a good bit of calcium. But the amount that we would need of those foods is rarely the amount that we're consuming to get enough calcium in our diet. So that is why milk was so popular, especially we saw that, I think, in the 90s and maybe early 2000s. There was a big dairy campaign. But it is important for us to be getting that calcium as well for our bones and things like that. So make sure you're paying attention to the other aspects of what you're buying to make sure that you are getting all the nutrients you can from that source. So we'll see you guys back in just a second when we are ready to make our vinaigrette, and then we'll be done with our lentils. We can move along.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
All right, our lentils are almost done. They need about 2-3 more minutes. So we are gonna go ahead and start on our vinaigrette. So first thing that we need is a skillet, and we're gonna need to put that over, I put it about medium heat, and we're gonna saute our shallots. So we'll throw those in and let those cook a little bit. And just for a minute, and then we're gonna add our cumin and some other ingredients as well. My pan wasn't quite hot yet, but it's getting there. You do wanna drain your lentils, so These have cooked out quite a bit. You can actually see how much they have cooked down, but you can still see a good bit of water in there. And really, like I said, you want them to be cooked but not mushy. So a good way to do this is put a bean to the side and just see how easy it is to squish it. That's the way that I check to see if they're done. And they're still a little hard, which is why I say you want to keep them cooked for just a couple more minutes. So checking throughout, it has been 15, actually we're at like 17 minutes now. So that tells you just how long it might take. You just want to keep an eye on those. And our shallots are doing good over here. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit. And we're going to add our cumin next. So we will need a teaspoon of cumin. And this will just help to flavor the shallots a little bit. Didn't quite get a teaspoon, so I'm just gonna shake a little more. And you just want to move that around until fragrant. Then I'm going to turn that off. So this is really quick. Most vinaigrettes don't take a ton of time, but you want to make sure that you're, of course, keeping an eye on that throughout. Okay, so we're going to add the rest of our stuff. So we have lemon juice, and you want about a tablespoon of lemon juice. So we're just going to use half of a lemon, which will be about a tablespoon. Usually you can get about 2 tablespoons from a whole lemon. You can use the stuff in the it's not technically a jar, but the squirt bottle of lemon if you need to. But either way, we just had a half a lemon left over, so that worked out. Okay, and then we're also gonna add some vinegar. We want 2 tablespoons of vinegar. This is balsamic vinegar. You could do another type of vinegar. I feel like balsamic gives it really good flavor and it pairs well with the lentils. So lentils do, by the way, they have kind of a meatier flavor to them, a meatier texture. Just to give you kind of an idea of the flavor, if you're not familiar with them, that is why I say it's definitely a great beginner option, because it does have some really good flavor that's different from our other beans. And one important thing about when we are choosing those protein sources is the fact of what the other things that it can do in our body. So it does help with our metabolism. It also helps to transport different vitamins in your body. So that is why we say it's really important to consume. Now, a lot of times our body does not store protein. It can store it for energy, but it does not store it to use it as it normally is used in the body. So we do need to make sure we're getting protein throughout our diet. It's not something that you can have a good amount of protein on Monday and you won't need it until next Monday or something like that. It's one of those things you want to make sure you're getting protein in your diet pretty much every single day. So check your meals, see what you're having, see how much protein is in your meals. Doesn't need to be the focus of your meal. We always say fruits and vegetables are very important because of those micronutrients that they have. But if you look at my plate, the plate does have a quarter of the plate is protein. So you want to make sure you're getting a quarter of your whole plate, your whole meal, to be protein focused. Okay, so we also have just a pinch of cayenne. It's a little more than a pinch, but I like stuff spicy, so it'll be okay. And just a little bit of salt. And then we have a quarter of a cup of olive oil. I have already done a little bit of olive oil, but we're gonna add just a little more. And we'll check over here on our lentils, see if they are almost done. which they should be very close. And yeah, I'm able to smush them now against the pan. So that tells me they are good to go. They're not quite overdone yet. So I'm gonna go drain these over here, and we'll add them to our bowl. And it's okay if you have a little bit of the juice in there, but we'll add them and then we'll just mix it all together. Just put that in there. And voila, they are done. This is really tasty for a bed of fish, something like salmon. You will see it pictured with salmon. We're making tuna, so we'll be doing that in just a second. And we'll finish that. We'll go make the tuna and we'll see you guys back in just a second.
After completing my contract, I still have to buy out of it? Come on. Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping home secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody try to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
Welcome back. So we have our lentils all done with our cumin vinaigrette. They taste so good. Last thing is to make our tuna. Now this is a marinated tuna. It's just marinated with some citrus, some herbs, and some red pepper flakes. I do have a little indoor grill here. You can use, I'm trying to get it. You can use a pan for this. I have used just a skillet before. That's typically how I cook it at home, although I do have a grill, an indoor grill that we sometimes will grill it on. So I've already sprayed my pan here, my grill grate, and I'm just gonna throw those on top. If I can grab it. Now, tuna is similar to steak. So where you would need, also depends on the grade of tuna that you're buying, but you do need to cook the outside very thoroughly before to make sure that you get all of anything that's on the outside cooked. That is for bacterial reasons. Same thing we do for steak. We tend to cook the outside, but the inside can be at a lower temperature than what the outside is. So for tuna, we want it to be cooked to 145. If you have a special grade of tuna, like a sushi grade, then you can eat it raw, but you need to make sure it is a sushi grade fish. They have their own standards in terms of how they, where the fish came from, and a lot more things than I know because I can't make sushi. So that is something a little bit different. When you're making tuna at home, you do want it to be at about 145 unless you get it from a source that is a sushi grade tuna. I love tuna steaks. They, to me, are just, again, so good, so different than what you typically would have if you're doing something like canned tuna or smoked. Well, we don't typically do smoked tuna, we do smoked salmon, but it's just a different flavor. And we let that sit for about 2 to 3 minutes on each side, and then we'll flip it and make sure we get the sides all done. And for tuna, tuna steaks, I typically like it medium rare. Once you get it too done, it can be a little bit tough. So this is one that you want to make sure it is cooked just to the right temperature, and that way it'll be really tasty, have a lot of flavor. So our fish are really important for the reasons of, and we'll learn about this in our fat section, but they have a lot of our omegas. And that is what we want when we are looking for, looking in our diet. We want to get that a couple times throughout the week. You'll hear a lot about people taking fish oil for that reason, because they don't tend to eat enough seafood. And that is for more of our brain health. So our omegas are really great for our brain health, our cognitive function, and preventing some of that cognitive decline. In terms of our protein, fish is one of the leanest sources of protein. So if you're trying to find something that's going to be lower in saturated fat, and we'll talk about the different types of fats, why fat's not necessarily bad for you, it's just those certain types like our trans and our saturated fats. But fish is very low in saturated fat, which is why it's a good source for you. So hopefully you guys can see it's starting to cook. We're getting a nice little layer of the white that's where it's grilling. It's starting to be cooked through. And then we will give it a good flip once it gets a certain way up. Now to cook it faster, you could cover this. Same thing as your stovetop. You could put a lid on it to cook it a little bit more quickly. But we're doing pretty good here. I'm gonna go ahead and flip it so you can see that how much it's creeped up. We want the same thing to happen on the other side. You see those beautiful grill marks. And we will let that finish up. So I do have my thermometer here to double check on that once it is done. I also, one of the tricks that I like to do, you saw me grab my tuna with this. Now that it has also touched raw tuna, I want to make sure that I am using clean utensils. So once you have used utensils that have touched raw meat, unless they are heated to the proper temperature, you want to make sure that you exchange those for something else, just for safety reasons. So we are gonna let this finish up. We'll show you guys what it looks like at the end. And our lentils are all done. These, again, great sources of protein here for you. Some other really good sources I'll mention really quickly are yogurt. Any of your non-fat or low-fat yogurts are great sources. Low-fat or non-fat dairy. Beans, I've said these, beans, nuts, seeds, legumes are really awesome for us, and any of your leaner animal-based protein sources. So make sure that you're getting enough protein in your diet, and we are gonna see you guys back next time to talk all about carbs, which is definitely a hot topic, and I can't wait to dive further in that with you. See you next time.